Hi, and welcome to part 2 of Dumpster Fire. Today, and next week, you'll be hearing a conversation between myself and Oren Aks, the one who solely managed much of the marketing for Fyre and all Fyre social accounts on behalf of Fyre Festival and Fuck Jerry. Accounts he actually still controls, even to this day. He's a cool dude and seems quite honest and ethical, and I hope to have him be a continued presence as the story continues to unfold. Hey, Oren. Good to talk to you again.
How's it going?
I want to say thank you for your willingness to participate in this story. This isn't the first time you've participated in a story that's been about Fyre Festival. In fact, in some ways,
not at all.
I was hoping to start with a little background on you and how you came to be involved, and then just kind of dive into some other aspects of the story. That sound cool?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Great.
let's do it.
If there's anyone listening that doesn't know who you are, Oren Aks, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, so back in the day, I was the graphic designer behind Fyre Festival. I came up with the social strategy and the marketing campaign with the orange tile that was launched with over 400 influencers and celebrities, and basically stopped the internet, and I would say was the successful part of Fyre Festival, not the criminal side. And I am now a social media consultant and own my own design studio that really focuses on kind of helping brands do extraordinary things in an ethical and positive way. So I try to team up with brands that really focus on things that do positive work, or just in general have kind of a nice outcome for the greater good of things in society, rather than just to sell. And I have basically been through every type of design team, firm, studio, whatever. I've been in editorial, I've been in interior graphics, I've been in social, and, I basically ended up at Fyre by being one of the first employees at Fuck Jerry, which at the time was the name, and then it turned into Jerry Media, which was a social first design studio, or just ad agency, I guess you can call it, that focused on harnessing memes at the time. And beyond memes, they didn't really do much more, like meme advertising. I came on as the first real designer, or just the first employee that had kind of like a background in, or like a degree in what they did. And the first month, I didn't really do anything while employed there. I just kind of did research and suggested a few upgrades to some accounts that we owned, but nothing substantial, and most of the work there was still pretty meme heavy. Then about a month after I started, we got approached by the Fyre team, who were friends. One of the employees on the Fyre team was friends with one of the founders of Jerry Media. And we came on as their social agency that helped with consulting mostly. And then after the first kickoff meeting, the first meeting or two, I would say, I spoke up a few times about the design being pretty inadequate, or just not up to snuff of what it should be if their goals are so lofty. At the time, the agency that did the infamous trailer for the festival did the graphics on the website, but they kind of teased us that Good Music and Kanye were going to be part of this festival and headline it, and I was basically like, you can't, and this is around the time that Yeezy just launched, so I was like, you can't launch this brand looking like a sandal. And so it quickly turned into my project without anybody on my team or on the Fyre team being present even, because there's nobody available to work on this really except me.
Gosh, there's so much here that I think so many people don't know. Thank you so much for being so open. You said that it was inadequate in the beginning. Can you give us maybe some details about, what was changed, or what it was in the beginning that it wasn't, when it was more polished?
when I joke that it looked like a sandals resort, it just felt like there was like blue watercolor splashes and like handwritten typography that kind of looked like a fake handwriting. It was like a computer-made handwriting font, which I hate those. It's like, if you're not going to do it by hand, don't bother. And all the images were really kind of stock images. Nothing really screamed edgy or, Kanye and good music to me. So it felt like it was trying to sell your parents like a resort vacation, all-inclusive kind of deal. It didn't really say to me, this is the future of luxury, or this is the future of festivals, and we're trying to revolutionize the scene. So I usually enter all my projects with kind of telling the brutal, honest truth, because I don't want to work on something if it's so boring, So it was in my best interest to kind of speak up and kind of rip it apart. And actually, they requested me to create like a document that pointed out specific things on the website that was really dumb, or like, didn't make sense, or wasn't cool enough, whatever you want to call it. So I made this document. I even have it somewhere, but it's screenshots of the website and me being like, this, don't do this. XYZ is wrong. Don't do this because it's, whatever. So they looked at that and were like, wow, he gets it. So there was a lot of these like little touches on the website that felt cheesy and kind of just not what you would consider with, again, Yeezy's colors were muted. They were kind of these like burgundies and dark turquoises, if that's a word. And then like the greens that he used and the bold typography and everything that kind of slapped you in the face when you looked at it, versus theirs that kind of had this like soft, sandy beach, like getaway resort vibe. It also just didn't feel expensive. It didn't feel like you would spend a lot of money when you looked at that website. You didn't get the vibe that you would want to drop like $250,000 on a villa in a yacht package with that website.
That makes a lot of sense. It obviously became a force, not just the festival and the buzz around it, but the social brand and power. Actually, one other thing I want to ask you, just timeline-wise, when did the engagement with Fyre start?
No, I would say it was December, because I remember I quit my previous job on Halloween to join. I really kind of dropped the ball on them. Like, I worked at Thrillist at the time, and I got kind of poached by the Jerry Media team, and they told me like I needed to come on board immediately. So I just kind of quit on Halloween. Thrillist was not thrilled at all about that. They didn't even give me a 2 week, like they didn't let me do my 2 week notice. They just kind of told me to leave that same day.
Jeez.
And then I sat around for a month after, which at first I was like, what did I do? Is this the right decision?
Funny how that works, huh? And so you guys have these initial meetings. Everyone sees you've got some talents. You kind of take over things. I think everyone recalls the Orange Tile campaign. When did that take place?
The Orange Tile started, I believe, in early December.
So it was pretty quick then after you started.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I mean, we launched it pretty quickly after, because they really liked it to a point where they were like trying to get like a Christmas version. I remember they tried to push on us to do one that had like a frosted, snowy orange tile version around Christmas. We kind of pushed back, saying it's just cheesy.
Move on.
And then I remember waiting on Kendall Jenner on Christmas Day, I believe. Like, I was flying back from New York to LA, and the Wi-Fi in the airplane wasn't working. It was only text was available. And I was communicating with the Fyre team and the Jerry Media team in the airplane, like getting like 1,000 texts a second. Everyone's freaking out that I can't send them assets, even though I'm working on them in the plane. And they're saying, like, Kendall's ready to post. We need the content. And I'm like, I literally cannot send you. I'm in an airplane. And I remember the Fyre team just could not comprehend this. They're like, just pay for the full package. We'll Venmo you for like the internet package. And I'm like, the internet is down. And when I landed, my parents actually live near Calabasas. So I like basically had them speed over back to their house just so I have internet, and then, you know, sent it to New York digitally so they can send it back to Calabasas to Kendall. After all of that, something got delayed, and we ended up having to wait till after New Year's anyways. So all of that chaos was for nothing. And that was kind of like a daily thing with every single big influencer. But the original orange tile that dropped was before Christmas. I would say like early December. And it was mostly people that were like in her circle. Like I know that like Bella Hadid, she posted. It kind of had this pre-holiday vibe of like people were just trying to figure out what their plans for Coachella. People were trying to kind of figure out what their plans for vacations were. It was perfectly timed for all that.
It sure was. You know, it's funny. I just Googled when was the orange tile campaign invented, and the second link is on Downtown in Business, and it says Fyre, the greatest marketing campaign that ever happened.
It's crazy to think now of the success of my idea, whereas at the time, you know, you can't really predict a viral success. So I didn't go into it thinking like I'm going to take over the internet. But what was interesting was the thing I thought of that kind of brought this all together was basically two things. In design school, I took like a color theory class, and we kind of went over the whole concept of like UPS brown. So the UPS brown is a trademarked brown. They created it from scratch. And the concept behind it is that type of brown is just not readily available in public. Like you don't see that brown throughout society so much, or just at all, because they invented it. And so when a big UPS truck pulls up and you're like sitting at a cafe, it basically dominates your view, and it's like a wall of brown that shows up, you know. So it was partly that, and then it was also around that time filters weren't really a thing, but it was kind of these image overlays, you know, like Paris had their terrorist attacks, and so people did an overlay on their photo of the Paris flag, or they did.
Yeah, I remember that.
Certain overlay.
The rainbow flag when gay marriage was legalized, that was another one. A lot of flags.
Exactly. So flags and kind of little marks that were like public unified stances, I guess you can call them. And everybody did it in solidarity of something. But again, you could see through the flag and you could see your image still. Like it was never just a solid color that just was posted, you know, and nobody posted. You couldn't really get away with posting things that weren't like a selfie and things like in your daily life at the time. Nobody just posted these abstract things. So I really kind of thought it through as like, what if we do that? What if we do just like something that fucks with everyone and is just unexpected and is just a solid color block? Like who's gonna stop us? So it's kind of the combination of all these things. And, you know, again, I thought of if you're following any of these Victoria's Secret models, you're probably following all of them. You're not following just one of them. And all the girls that were brought on the trip, you're probably following, you know, a majority of the models that we worked with. And so in my head, it was like, if they all post at the same time, the algorithm at the time was done by the time you posted it. So if somebody posted right after you, it would just flow in that order. And so, you know, again, if 400 people and you follow like even 1 to 5% of them, they're going to show up in chronological order. So if you're following all these models, you're basically going to get it one after another. And so the idea was for somebody to just keep scrolling and keep scrolling and keep scrolling and be like, what the fuck is happening here? And it worked, you know. It was like overnight it became kind of a success without us really doing much. We didn't put any spend behind it. We didn't do any, I mean, obviously we spent it on these models, but we didn't really push it. We didn't do anything. We were like a no-name brand. And this was overnight what made us, talked about. And then everybody started kind of paying attention, started to repost it. People who just liked Ja Rule posted it and were like, my man Ja Rule's up to something. All these things that were kind of, people just wanted to participate in a collective effort. They didn't really understand the scale that it would rise to. And obviously now, what it's become, they never understood it or could have fathomed that. But it was really just like something to be part of and something to participate in. And at the time, everything was like that on the internet. The internet's still like that, but I think Ice Bucket Challenge and all these types of things, these challenges were very new and people were very ready to participate without it being like overdone yet. And we were just at the beginning of that era. So it was just perfectly timed and everything was the perfect storm for us to really take the internet by storm.
Yeah, and that you did. There's a lot of credit to go around with Fyre Festival, and there's certainly a lot of blame. In simplest terms, if someone were to ask you or you were to hear someone else be asked who should get credit for the marketing of Fyre Festival, what's the proper answer?
Well, I think I didn't really work on getting the models. At a certain point, I started to communicate with them, like in the DM, and those were more about like, if you post, this orange tile or the trailer or whatever, we'll send you with 2 friends, we'll give you a villa, whatever, kind of a negotiation. But originally, like, we had somebody specifically dealing with getting influencers. So I don't think this would have succeeded without a team effort necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, I could have come up with this orange tile and all the design and social strategy, and it would have been fine because at Jerry Media, we had at the time like a 40 million follower network throughout all our pages, but it wasn't necessarily the right audiences. So we could push it on them, but it wasn't necessarily the luxury market that was going to come to the festival. So
Sure.
Yeah, it might have gotten some impressions, but I think the group effort of bringing those A-list models really brought the necessary eyeballs to get my idea off the ground. So it's also the internet, you know what I mean? Like the internet has a lot of responsibility in picking this up and going with it. So it's a collective thing. Like an idea is only an idea that until, the people that participate and kind of help it take off, make it what it is.
That's a good answer. Were you able to take credit for any of your work at the time, either with Fyre or, anywhere else?
At the time, there was not much room for credit. We were just moving so fast. I mean, I remember I would show up to a meeting and Ja Rule was smoking a blunt outside and he kind of leaned out his car window and he's like, "Oh, you're the guy. Like, dude, good job," and he did like a little fist bump, whatever. And that was the biggest credit I got at the time. And then after the festival, when I kind of went underground and quit Jerry Media and just left New York, I just could not talk about it. There's no one who wanted to hear it. Every agency, every studio, nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to be part of that and thinking I'm bad blood. And then, obviously nowadays I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. It's too bad that the Fyre team, did what they did and kind of tainted my idea. But at the same time, I think people saw through who did what in the story. And I think the documentaries really helped shape that. I was able to kind of, my work explained to the public without having to do it every single time I'm in a meeting with a potential job or something. So, yeah, I think now it's easier to take the credit for it. And back then it was something that I just didn't want to be part of. But at the time, there was, like I said, there was rumors that Kanye would come on board as the headliner, even as Good Music was already announced that they were going to be part of Fyre. Kanye was not officially announced. And at one point, one of the selling ideas to him was telling him that he could take credit for all the creative direction of the festival, and then we would market it as Kanye West or Yeezy or Good Music was behind the creative direction. And I took offense to it. I had so many I had so many sleepless nights that I was like, "You really gonna do this to me?" And then at a certain point, I was like, maybe I'm a little flattered by this. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how design is. It's not like back in the day that Picasso signed his paintings. Like, graphic designers just don't put their name on anything. They, you know what I mean? They just give it to Nike, and Nike takes credit, and that's it.
For sure.
So I kind of knew that that's showbiz, baby, you know, and I just moved on with it.
That's a good story. So you brought up the documentaries. There are two main ones that I think that's usually the bulk of people's Fyre Festival knowledge. And certainly who made those documentaries had, you know, if not a major, a minor agenda. One of them was, of course, made by Fuck Jerry. That's the Netflix one. And I don't believe you participated in that, though I think you like show up in it a little, maybe. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they tried to get me to be part of it. I just dodged their phone calls for months to just not be part of that.
They came out within a week of each other, didn't they?
So the original thing that went down was basically they both knew they were in production, and you know, the Fuck Jerry guys have always played dirty, and they kind of were bribing people in the Bahamas and talking to figuring out who was interviewed and trying to coerce them to leak information on how far in the production the other team is. And it kind of was like this cat and mouse game for a few months. And, you know, Hollywood's a pretty small town. And if you've worked on one production, you know everybody on another production. So it was leaking. I mean, both parties had like a very leaky production timeline. And at one point, I even heard that the Fuck Jerry one, the Netflix one, was at one of the film festivals, and it got pretty bad reviews. So they kind of went back to the drawing board, sort of interviewing more of the people that the Hulu documentary had, and then kind of aggressively pushed it out to market. At the time, I was working with Hulu, and I was actually pitching them on a launch strategy for the documentary that would reflect the launch campaign of Fyre Festival. I wanted to recreate the orange tile and the launch with, you know, as many models as we could. And while we were in negotiation of how to do this, all of a sudden we got, you know, there was like a public announcement that Netflix announced a date for it, but we had about a month and a half or so. And so our negotiation kind of went silent, and I wasn't really sure why. I was a little annoyed, but it was, you know, it was not really my movie. So I just kind of waited it out. And then all of a sudden, and Hulu didn't tell me this, again, I had just assumed there were so many leaks at the time that they just were trying to keep it hush hush. And they decided to drop their version a week earlier, or like a few days earlier, and just a blindside the Netflix doc. And so, yeah, they came out the same week, but it was very strategic and controversial and kind of meant to be that way, very last minute. And I actually think that was a great move on Hulu's part. So I wasn't so upset at the end. I was like, all right, you guys did well. Like, kudos.
Who was the driver behind the Hulu documentary?
I mean, it was the director. You know, I had my own people that I spoke to there.
But it was no one that was involved in Fyre or had inside knowledge, or anyone that was, it wasn't like a person that was a part of its project like Fuck Jerry. It was more of just we want to kind of tell the story as much as we can.
They both approach it from a different angle, but ultimately end up at the same place. But why I joined the Hulu one was because they wanted to get to the bottom of the truth. And I wanted to align with somebody who's trying to tell the truth and not cover up their tracks.
Sure.
And so even when I quit working at Fuck Jerry, I knew that they were working on a documentary. I mean, the night that the festival failed, when there's like the famous video of Billy standing on tables and talking to people, trying to like calm them down. My CEO at the time, he told all of us to go back to our house. Like, he sent us back to the house that we were staying in, and he stayed and tried to like rescue Billy, basically. Mick was kind of like that. He's kind of like, you know, he tried to save the day, and Billy was the client, and so he wanted to kind of save his ass because he saw that Billy couldn't handle it. So he thought, you know, he's the client, maybe we could help him. So Mick even got on tables and was like trying to calm people down. And Mick was there all day. Like, we had no idea what was going on. We didn't even have internet in the house that we were staying in. We didn't have phones. We were totally in darkness. We didn't know the festival even collapsed until nightfall. So when he came back to the house, the first thing he kind of did was like, he was so energized. He was like, grab all the cameras. We're going back right now. And it was like 11 at night or something. It was very late. He's like, we're going right now. We're starting to film as much as we can. We're making a documentary. And I remember we all thought he was out of his mind, but we kind of went with it. So we had no car. We were hitchhiking in every direction on this island. So we hitchhiked at like 11 at night with some random guy who we already got his phone number because we hitchhiked with him earlier. So we called him up at like 11 at night, told him, each one of these drives cost like $75. The locals started getting wise with like the fact that no one has cars. And so we got into this minivan and we started to creep up to the gates of the festival where there was like some locals guarding the gate, but they were kind of having their own little, not party, but they were just kind of hanging out. And we saw this coming up. And so we told our driver, like, don't stop, just keep rolling. And we're going to get out the window and just tell them, like, flash our badges. And we're just going to tell them we're here for, like, official business. And the poor guy, he just kind of went with it. And we basically did just what I said and got in. And when you get into the grounds, there's a hill. You first have to go over a hill, and then you kind of get to the top, and that's when you saw the whole layout of the festival. And it was dark out, and it was kind of creepy. It felt like it was super eerie, and like felt, something was off and really bad. It was just like the vibe was so wrong. And so we started creeping, and we even turned off our headlights.
That's it for the first half of my conversation with Oren. Don't forget, it's present buying season, and there's a bunch of cool Prison Fire merch to buy over at dumpsterfire.show. If you've already checked it out, the prices are much more tolerable now, and all proceeds are going toward prison reform causes. It's some of the best quality clothing you can find, certainly not typical merch standards. Till next time.